Culture shock. In 2008, our family of four, my husband and our four small children, moved to Honduras to be full-time missionaries. We definitely came in strong with that first stage, that honeymoon stage. We were enamored with the terrain, the food, the people. We expected to have fun. We were excited and enthusiastic because it was all new. We did experience problems with language barriers, with isolation from others, but we decided to focus on what was familiar. So I'm going to use an example of driving for all of the different stages and understand that these are just generalizations. So typically driving in the United States is about control and rules. We want people to follow the rules. We enforce those rules. But driving in Honduras is about adaptation. And rules such as lines or rules of the road or lanes or red lights, they're optional. So in the honeymoon stage, we took pictures of cars driving towards us on the wrong side of the road because it was just happened. And at that time, we didn't really have a problem with it. But as time went along, I prefer to call the second stage flight or fight, withdrawal or anger stage, as opposed to crisis from the U curve or hostility from the W curve. But as we started to see these differences, our view of the host culture started to become negative. We started using phrases like in the States. For example, in the States, there would be lines on the road. People would be following the rules of the road. In the States, people wouldn't be driving on the wrong side of the road. So phrases like this would just glorify our own US culture. If humor was even used at this point, it was probably disguising anger. And this is how we started to respond because we were feeling a loss of control. But complaining does not mean that we're gaining control over the situation. Complaining means that the situation is controlling us. So complaining does not mean that I'm gaining control over that situation. Complaining means that the situation is controlling me. Thank goodness a missionary taught and change and transition and cultural adjustment. And I don't think I would call this third stage being at home or in sync from the W curve, but I think I would call it tolerance or being fine. And in this stage, there is understanding that it's not going to change. Those cultural values and other people aren't going to change. And so I need to be fine with that. There's a sense of tolerance and adjusting and a learning to adapt. And so then your talk begins to change as well. This is not the way I would do it, but it's the way it's done. So I'm okay, or I'm fine with this. I can live with the difference. So back to the driving example, I really prefer people follow the rules of the road, that they don't cross the line. I prefer that they don't go down the extra lane and go in front of people. I really prefer that, but it's not the way that it's done. So I'm fine, I'm okay, and I can actually live with that difference. At this time, humor can help with adjusting, laughing at ourselves, and seeing the positive sides of the other culture. The fourth stage of culture shock is appreciation or fit. We started to appreciate all of the wonderful things about the Honduran values. Hondurans can easily adapt to circumstances, and they don't have to control or fix everything or fix situations. Hondurans value relationships over tasks. So I can sit at the restaurant with my friend all day if I want and not be bothered. Hondurans value being helpful, and they'll try to help you even if they don't know how. They'll just try to help you in any way that they can. And in the example of driving, I can start to appreciate that if I need to swerve because there's a pothole or another car or something comes out in the road and I need to swerve, that the other cars are going to adapt for me. I'm going to end with one last story. So as a missionary, we used to write a check and deposit in the bank. And it would take 21 days for that money to clear so that we could use our money in Honduras. I used to get upset that when one time I went to the bank, it was completely fine. I could deposit my check. And another time I couldn't. And every single time they gave me a different reason. So there was like no rule or no rhyme to why it was happening. One time they would say, we just don't do that. We don't deposit checks. Another time they would say it's too much money. Another time they would say there's a little smudge on the check. So I'd have to write another one so it was clear. and I just couldn't understand it. But once I learned about the cultural value, a couple of them, relationship versus task and direct versus indirect communication, I started to expect that Hondurans would be helpful. I also started to add another aspect when I went to a relational element when I went to the bank, such as including a greeting or small talk, even in my broken Spanish. And I found that my experience at the bank was more pleasant. Hondurans didn't change at all, but I was able to recognize and adapt to the value and was learning to appreciate the differences. So when culture shock comes, we can resist it or we can recognize and work through the stages. It's not a one and done event, but it is a process that may repeat as different experiences and those value differences arise. Move towards understanding and appreciation.